Today on Nova Legends podcast, I want to talk about how we have destroyed an iconic event, the Virginia High School League State Basketball Tournament. And we're on the eve of the 2024 state championships. We have 12 games, 12 finals on Friday and Saturday in Richmond. Maybe Thursday, Friday, and Saturday in Richmond. So there's a lot of good basketball play. It is exciting when a new champion is crowned, but I do want to talk about the history of the event and how it's evolved and where we are today. The 70s was the first decade of integrated basketball. But in the early 60s, you had all white teams, all black teams participating in separate competitions. And slowly in the mid to late 60s, the high schools integrated. And by 1970, we had integrated basketball in some of the strongest teams we had ever seen. In the state tournament in the 70s, Moses Malone won 2 state titles at Petersburg. We saw Ralph Sampson at Harrisonburg High School win a state AA championship. And then we saw the great Ginger Rouse, who played at NC State after playing at Robinson. She won one of the first girls state titles for Robinson. These are iconic players in the state tournament. It meant so much. The crowds were huge. The tournament was held at that point at the University of Virginia, University Hall, where UVA played. We'd see Terry Holland at these games, and it was an amazing time, and also Debbie Ryan. It was an amazing time to be a basketball fan and a high school basketball fan. And obviously, at that time, there was less options to watch the NBA on TV. Some of the games are only on tape delay, and we may get a game of the week. So, college basketball, there was no ESPN yet, so we'd have a game of the week on the weekends, but there wasn't tons of basketball during the week. So obviously, high school basketball probably meant more, but the tournament at that time was probably at its apex in prominence. My sister in 1980, so 79, 80, she went to the state tournament for Robinson. And at the time, the girls AAA played on Wednesday. So they had doubleheaders. The girls AAA played on Wednesday. The boys single A played on Thursday. The Final Four would play on Thursday afternoon. The Final Four for the double A would play on Thursday night, I believe. And then the boys AAA would be on Friday. Maybe I had that wrong. Maybe the girls AAA was also on Friday as well. But anyway, my sister played, and I wasn't able to stay that weekend to see TC Williams play their semifinal matchup. And so I remember listening to that game on the radio because I had seen TC Williams play at Robinson. All the regional championship games were at Robinson back then. And sometimes districts were at Robinson too. So I watched all the games. Every round was at Robinson. So I knew the teams really well. The Final Four was a big event at Robinson for the girls and the boys. The girls would be on Thursday some years. The boys would be on Friday. They would switch that in later years. And then the finals would be on Saturday. Always a doubleheader. So you always basketball is a tournament sport. It's also a doubleheader sport. All the great tournaments around the country, the NCAA women's, the Final Four for men's, the NCAA. It's always doubleheaders, regional, sub-regional doubleheaders, conference tournaments, doubleheaders. So doubleheaders, it helps to generate interest in basketball because when you see a doubleheader like a Final Four, the games, there's synergies between the games because the winners will play. There's interest in both games. And so double headers are an effective way to attract new fans and to bring neutrals back. Even if your team loses, you want to see the next game. I wanted to watch TC Williams play Booker T. Washington because I had seen them play in regionals. So when I listened to that game with 1980 with TC Williams and Booker T, it was either 4 or 5 overtimes, I believe. TC Williams was led by the great Arnie Russell and another tremendous players. And William Walker, Billy Walker, led Booker T, and he ended up being a star at Norfolk State. And I believe he scored 39. And I was able to see him in the state final again. But I missed against Garfield in Othell Wilson. because my sister had played the game before because it was a doubleheader. So that I was able to see the game before. But anyway, this was a great time to be a basketball fan. We had huge crowds at U-Haul, and people would stay for the whole weekend. I remember my eighth grade, one of the famous eighth grade teachers at Robinson, his name was Mr. Singletary. Him and his wife would always be there for the whole weekend. Coaches would be there. That was a weekend vacation. That was a weekend getaway. Now sometimes you would goof off and play golf. You wouldn't go to all the doubleheaders. Maybe you wouldn't do all the things, but I sure would. But it was a time where everyone went to see the doubleheaders, to see the state tournament. And I think the key to it was it was always at UVA. The competition meant so much. It was so hard to qualify because don't forget, at that time only the regional winners qualified for state. So you had four different competitions. The single A and double A girls played in the fall, so we didn't see them. But you had the triple A girls, single A boys, double A boys, triple A boys. You had four competitions, the final fours and the finals. Just lots of great basketball. And because you had the double headers, you got to know the teams a little bit. So you'd come back and watch the finals. You had some connection to that game. On the other hand, like for example, this weekend, we have six finals on the boys and six finals for the girls. Well, I do know some of the teams because of of my work on social media, but there's no connection because I haven't seen them play. If they would have had the semifinals where we can see them, then obviously, the finals would mean more. But am I going to go for a whole weekend to watch six finals? No. Is anybody else? I don't know anybody. Maybe there's some meetings down there. I used to go with my buddy Doug Yule from Westfield. We'd meet. I had my buddy Niels Moeller would go with me. There's folks who are fans of the state tournament, folks from other parts of the state who I'd meet at the state tournament. I'd always come back and we'd get together and we'd see each other and we'd talk. My buddy Tim Moss from Lynchburg, who played in the state tournament himself against my high school Robinson. But no one goes, the state tournament is no longer an event. So you only go if you have some kind of connection. So a lot of my friends go to South Lakes. Obviously, they're all going to go because South Lakes is back in the final again. So if you have a team going, you're going to go, or if you're connected to that team, you're going to go. No one goes for the whole weekend anymore. There's no one wants to see a weekend of finals. So they're basically they've destroyed the tournament as an event for neutrals. It's just strictly you're going to go if your team's in and it works out for you, you can somehow make it. But it's just one game. It's not a weekend. It's not a Final Four. So there's to talk about how it unraveled and how it became so poor. It probably started in '85, I believe, when they moved the tournament to James Madison. Now, look, James Madison is a fine place to hold a tournament. It is they have a great field house. You feel close to the event, but it's a little bit less central in the state. And it's just a little bit less iconic at the time. U-Haul, we're going to Ralph's house. That was symbolic when you went to the state tournament, and fans all wanted to go to Charlottesville. We wanted to hang out. We wanted to walk around the university. So it began to start when we went to James Madison. That was I don't know what caused that, but it probably wasn't a good movement it probably wasn't a good move for the tournament. And I think another big moment was when they began to take two teams from each region. So now the 4-team Final Four tournament became 8 teams. And that became a little bit complicated, and they had to kind of divide the tournament up because, there wasn't enough gym space for large venues to hold that many games in Charlottesville or Madison. So I think in '88 they had the AAA boys and girls in Richmond at the Robins Center, beautiful place to hold a tournament. And then the boys single A, boys double A, they had that back in Charlottesville. So they split it up. So, I went to Robinson. I got to see some great basketball. I went to Richmond. I did go to Robinson, but I went to Richmond. I saw some great tournament basketball. And the good thing about this tournament was you got to see 3 games from each team. You got to see the quarterfinals, semis, and finals. So you saw 3. So by the time they got to the finals, you were really invested. You knew everything about these teams. You knew the teams, you knew the coaches, you knew the cheers, the cheerleaders, you knew the dance section, the bands. You knew the teams really well. So that did work. I mean, but you didn't get to see, I didn't get to see the single A and double A. So that was kind of a down point. But at least I got to see the girls and the boys, and I got to see a lot of basketball. So wasn't optimal, but it still worked. You know, we still had doublehead. We still had lots of doubleheaders, lots of opportunity to watch basketball. Everyone was still going to the tournament. I think another move that probably didn't help the tournament was when they moved to Lynchburg. But they had a year or two in the scope in Norfolk, and then they went to Lynchburg. And I just think, you know, those locations are further away from many parts of the state. And, you know, Lynchburg held a nice tournament. I mean, I always thought the flame on the floor was a little bit scary, but, you know, I saw some great basketball there. Memorable moments like when JJ Redick played against Hayfield and then I believe John Marshall in the final. Um, and, you know, and then Norfolk was some great games between Potomac and Hampton and other, but it's not really iconic. I think we lost that. I actually think VCU does work in that matter. I think VCU is a nice place for a tournament, but you know, Lynchburg and I don't think Norfolk were great moves, but still, I think people still you know, supported the tournament. It still meant a lot, and I went. Me and my friends went every year. Um, one of the biggest changes in the beginning of the end, when the tournament really began to go south, and when we really began to destroy the tournament, was in 2004. And that was the year where they stopped doing double headers at the state tournament, and they started doing girl boy. Every game was one girls game, one boys game per double header. Now, I think someone thought this was a good idea, gender equity, and I'm all for gender equity. But what that did was you now have a double header where there's no connection between the games. So then, so what you're doing is those teams, the winners of that game, are playing next. So there's not any like embedded interest in watching both games. And then if you're a coach, you can't scout the team you might be playing later on because they might play at the other doubleheader at nighttime. And so it's bad for coaches. It's bad for recruiters because if you wanted to come watch the girls doubleheader because you're recruiting for Old Dominion women's team, now you have to stay to do two sets of doubleheaders. But it just ruined the doubleheaders for the fans and the neutrals because there wasn't Final Fours with a nexus, with any synergy. If I go to the NCAA Women's Final Four, I get to see on Saturday, or maybe they do it on Sunday, you know, the semis, and then you can think about how the teams the winners are going to match up on Tuesday. Same for the men's. Someone, I probably well intended, I'm not sure, but had a ridiculous idea to destroy the doubleheaders. That was the beginning of the end, and whoever did that could pat themselves on the back because that was an idea that really started the end of the prominence of our state tournament, at least as an event for neutrals. People no longer could see that event as something I could watch, say, for the whole weekend because they destroyed the interest in each separate double header. And I guarantee the person who decided this still doesn't understand today because they don't care about interest in the basketball. They have other things that they're trying to address. So in 2008, TC Williams won a state championship, men's, boys, and that was the first time a Northern Region team, which is Fairfax County, Arlington, Alexandria, had won a state championship in 27 years. It's a pretty huge event for us. And I think we were seen as not being as good as the rest of the state in basketball for whatever reason, or maybe it was just bad luck, but it was a big moment. Well, after 2012, they somehow decided just to double the number of classifications. We went from 3 to 6. I don't know if they did any studies saying that 6 is the number, or, you know, why didn't they go to 3 to 4? Was there a reason they went from 3 to 6? Yeah, I don't know. I've never seen the research, but all of a sudden, where 3 titleists was enough, now we had to have 6. So this was a huge move. This was the nail in the coffin. This would really destroy the competition in the tournament. I mean, for example, afterwards, since half of the Division 6, the largest schools were in the old Fairfax, Arlington, Alexandria, the old Northern Region, which ended up being divided. That area, and I'll say we were guaranteed a spot in the final. After many years not being in the final, not winning, we're guaranteed a spot in the finals. And we started winning them left and right. Hayfield won two. Westfield won a state title. Centerville won a state title. South County won a state title. Whitson won a state title. Well, the reason why we won so many state titles was because many of the best schools no longer were in that classification, because many of the best Tidewater, Hampton Roads teams, and also Richmond teams no longer were in the top classification. It was mostly more wealthier suburban schools that were the largest for some reason. So we took the best schools out of the toughest competition. And when you do a competition, if you have to group schools, you probably want to group schools by the quality of the competition. And if you're not doing that, you probably should be asking yourself, what did we do? I don't know if anyone's ever asked themselves these questions. I just don't know. I don't know if anyone cares. Maybe maybe a state title, a regional title helps people keep jobs, help them seem like heroes. They need to get trophies. I don't know, but they ruined the competition. This weekend, probably the best team in Virginia in the boys' side is John Marshall, Class 2. They used to be in the highest AAA. Probably the second toughest team is Woodside. They're in Class 5. Hampton is in Class 4. They beat Patriot, who's in Class 6. So all these are fine teams, but we need to have them in the same competition, because if we can have them in a competition together, we will start attracting the kind of crowds that made the tournament so special in the first place. One of the reasons why people feel like you can't draw big crowds, and the reason why we have to have home game in tournaments, which probably is not fair, is because there's no confidence that we can draw crowds for a neutral site, because we've watered down the competition so much. I mean, look at Loudoun County, where I now live. In some of the regions, 2 teams out of 10 qualify for states every year. So 2 Loudoun County teams are going to be in the state tournament every year, no matter what happens. So, and then sometimes there's Loudoun County teams that play in the semis. So they're guaranteed a spot in the final. If you water down your competition, if it seems less easily attainable, you're right. It's not going to attract neutrals. You're ruining your own brand. And I think the reason why a lot of the decisions are made the way they are is because we think that supporters are the only way we can fund these competitions. Whereas when we used to have competitions that were based on merit and history, neutrals could help. U-Haul would have 8,000 people. People would buy a pass for the whole tournament. Regionals as well. Not anymore. Nobody really cares except for the schools that are playing. I know I do my part with this podcast. I love it, but most people who are involved in sports don't care about the overall competition. They may see themselves as caring about the money that funds the competition, and I get that. But I also think you have to understand that the brand and how you build the competition will, in the end, make the competition more valuable. You get more crowds. It'll work out better. As this proliferation of teams in the postseason and the number of champions happens, you cheapen the regular season because you have so many bites of the apple. It's never over. When I played in the class of '84 at Robinson, my team lost in the first round of districts, right? 2 teams went to regionals back then. So you had to get to the final to get to the regional, and that could change if the regular season winner lost in the semis, it might be a playback game. But anyway, those days are over. It was hard to qualify for regionals. 1 team qualified for state, and then you had Final Fours. Now, that might be a little bit tough. You might be able to have 2 teams qualify for regionals and states. I get it. You have a bad night, and you have some great players on a team. Over region is really tough. But it's never over for so many competitions. There are not enough elimination games. I mean, the semifinals of region is a big night because you have some elimination games, quarterfinals as well, and then the first round of some district tournaments. The elimination games are big, but because the regular season doesn't mean anything. if we make the playoffs a little more selective, you're going to make the regular season more important, and you're going to bring crowds back for regular season. But if the games don't mean anything, it is going to have an effect, and you have to consider, the regular season. It is important. So there is a number that you want in terms of how many people qualify for postseason. Maybe one is not enough, and maybe four, or like in the Occoquan region when last year all 8 teams qualified from a district to regionals. That's way too many. But one or two. I think football suffers from this. Football is a game where you can't play tournaments. So, the regular season needs to mean a lot. And if the playoffs go on too long, you really hurt your winter sports. So, you need to look at the number of people qualify for playoffs. I know you want to make everyone a winner. Everyone gets a trophy. Every principal is a hero. All the ADs are great. DSAs, what do you call them now? But you're hurting the competition, and in the end, you're hurting the next season. So you need to study. You need to look at other states. What's working? What states have the biggest tournament? What states are making the most money off of it? I guarantee you they don't have the structure that Virginia has. I mean, some of us are holding on. But look, I want you in the comment section below. I want you to let me know if you're staying for the whole state tournament this weekend. I don't think anyone does that. You can't watch the whole regional tournament anywhere now because there's no double headers. Um, you know, the other day there was a great game down at Richmond where Elsie Bird beat Albemarle on a last second shot. And, it just occurred to me that, I was reminded that, in the old days, I would have seen that lap court shot. And it's true. It was state semis. It would have been a state tournament. Now I saw it through social media. But wouldn't it have been nice if we have a situation where, we all can be watching the semis again in the finals? And that creates a whole different dynamic. That creates true fans of high school basketball and true fans of the tournament. We need to move back to these days because it could be very special again. We might not, it maybe that the times have changed, and high school sports will never mean as much as they used to because of how society's changed, but I don't think so. And anyway, we have to give it our best shot. And the way to give it our best shot is make the games as meaningful as possible. Make it more interesting for neutrals. Don't do things like, when you have a doubleheader, make people go outside in the rain to wait to come back in. Don't have state tournament semifinal games 10 miles apart when you can have them at the same place. Don't have a team that has boys and girls teams in the state semis at the same place 5 miles away. Just do things to put games back together. You'll be surprised how people can enjoy and see the magic of tournament basketball. Thanks for listening.